It started the way these things often do. Not with anger or bad blood, but with laughter. A loose, careless kind of laughter that comes from confidence stacked on top of confidence. The room was filled with Marines who had spent years earning their black belts, sweating through drills, breaking boards, collecting stories they told each other late at night. They were fit, sharp, and certain of who they were. When you live inside that kind of certainty long enough, you stop questioning it. Someone made a comment. Someone else smirked. The idea took shape slowly, passed from one grin to another until it became a shared thought. A challenge, but not a serious one. More like entertainment. Something to shake up the routine. They looked at her and decided, without saying it out loud, that this would be easy. Too easy. She did not fit their picture of a fighter. She stood there relaxed, hands loose at her sides, posture neutral. No bouncing on the balls of her feet. No exaggerated confidence. She did not stretch or crack her knuckles. She simply watched. That alone should have raised questions, but it did not. The Marines were already too far into the joke. Fight us. The words were thrown casually, almost friendly. No formal challenge. No sense of danger. Just an invitation wrapped in bravado. The kind of thing said when you expect a laugh in return, or maybe a polite refusal. Even if she accepted, they assumed it would last seconds. A demonstration, not a contest. What made it worse was the setting. This was their space. Their mat. Their rules. They had fought here before. Won here before. The walls carried the sound of their training, the echoes of commands and impact. Everything about the room reinforced the same message. You are in our world now. They underestimated the quiet in her response. No hesitation. No explanation. Just a nod. That single movement landed heavier than words would have, but they missed it. A few Marines exchanged looks, surprised she did not back down. Someone laughed again, louder this time, as if to keep the moment light. Inside their heads, the story was already written. Black belt Marines versus one woman. Strength versus size. Numbers versus confidence. Experience versus curiosity. They told themselves it was not personal. Just a test. Just sparring. Just a lesson she might appreciate later. What they did not see was the shift that had already happened. The moment she agreed, the joke stopped being a joke. For her, it was never entertainment. It was not about proving anything. It was about responding to a challenge the way she had been trained to respond to every challenge. Calmly. Completely. Without emotion. The Marines were still talking. Still deciding who would go first. Still smiling. One of them stepped forward, rolling his shoulders, loosening up. He had the look of someone ready to perform. Ready to impress his peers. He expected resistance. Maybe a scramble. Maybe a quick takedown followed by applause. She did not mirror his energy. She did not match his stance. She simply adjusted her footing slightly, so slightly it was almost invisible. Years of karate training lived in those small adjustments. Balance, distance, timing, the kind of fundamentals that disappear into muscle memory. Someone clapped. Someone said something about going easy. The air felt light, casual, as if the outcome had already been agreed upon by everyone except her. That shared confidence became the biggest mistake in the room. The challenge had started as a joke, but it had crossed a line the moment it was accepted. What the Marines thought they were offering was a harmless test. What they had actually done was invite someone with a different kind of discipline, a deeper kind of patience, into their circle. They believed strength would decide everything. They believed numbers mattered. They believed experience only counted if it looked like theirs. They had no idea that the real fight had already begun the moment they stopped taking her seriously, and she never stopped taking them seriously at all. It happened before anyone spoke. Before the challenge, before the laughter, before the first step onto the mat. The judgment landed the moment she walked into the room. I scanned her once, maybe twice, and moved on. The verdict was instant and silent. Not a threat. Not serious. Not someone to worry about. People like to believe they judge fairly, but most decisions are made in seconds. Height, build, gender, the way someone carries themselves. The Marines had trained long enough to trust their instincts, and those instincts told them the same story. She did not look dangerous. She did not look dominant. She did not look like someone who belonged in their category. They filled in the gaps without realizing it. Maybe she was support staff. Maybe an instructor in something theoretical. Maybe just passing through. The idea that she could be on their level never fully formed, because nothing about her appearance matched the image they respected. No visible aggression. No loud presence. No attempt to command attention. Underestimation is rarely loud. It is quiet and comfortable. It sounds like jokes made without malice. It looks like relaxed shoulders and half smiles. It feels like certainty. The kind that tells you there is no real risk here, no need to be careful. She felt it immediately. The way conversations did not stop when she approached. The way no one squared up or adjusted their posture. The way eyes slid past her instead of locking on. She had been here before, more times than she could count. Different rooms, different uniforms, same reaction. People saw what they expected to see. What they missed was everything that could not be seen. The years of repetition done in silence. The early mornings when the only sound was breath and movement. The discipline built not for display, but for survival. None of that shows on the surface. It lives in timing, in restraint, in knowing when not to act. The Marines stood taller without meaning to. Their confidence expanded because it felt safe. They spoke freely, unguarded. One of them leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching with mild interest. Another stretched casually, already imagining how quickly it would end. They believed they were in control of the situation simply because nothing had challenged that belief yet. She did not correct them. People assume confidence means announcing yourself. Real confidence does not bother. It waits. She stayed quiet, not out of nerves, but out of habit. She had learned long ago that the less people expect from you, the more space they give you to operate. Being underestimated creates a strange kind of freedom. No pressure to perform. No eyes watching closely. No one preparing for what you might do. Every movement you make lands cleaner because no one is braced for it. Every decision you take comes faster because no one is disrupting your rhythm. They mistook her calm for uncertainty, her stillness for lack of experience, her silence for intimidation. Each assumption stacked neatly on top of the last, building a false picture they trusted completely. It never crossed their minds that someone could be both quiet and dangerous, composed and capable. This was not arrogance on their part. It was conditioning. They had been taught to read strength a certain way. Loud voices, big frames, assertive energy. Anything outside that pattern felt familiar and safe. Their training had prepared them for obvious threats, not subtle ones. She watched them watch her. She noticed the smiles that said this will be quick. She noticed the way no one positioned themselves defensively. She noticed how close they stood, how open their stances were, how relaxed their hands remained. Underestimation always leaves clues. Her body responded before her mind did. Small adjustments. Weight settling evenly. Breath slowing. Focus narrowing. She did not need to prove anything. She did not need their approval. She only needed to be ready when the moment shifted, because moments always shift. They thought they were being generous by not taking her seriously. They thought they were being polite. What they were really doing was handing over the advantage without realizing it. Underestimation blinds people. It narrows their awareness. It convinces them nothing unexpected is about to happen. She had learned to let that belief sit untouched. Let it grow. Let it settle in. Because once people decide who you are, they stop looking for anything else. And that is when every opening begins to appear. They believe power came from force. From speed. From size and pressure applied without hesitation. Years of Marine training had reinforced that idea again and again. Push harder. Hit first. Overwhelm the opponent. Control the space. It worked in most situations, especially against people who panicked or tried to match strength with strength. Her training had taught something different. Discipline before aggression. Control before impact. Movement with purpose instead of movement for show. Karate was not about meeting force head-on. It was about understanding it, redirecting it, and deciding exactly when to end the exchange. The Marines warmed up with big motions. Strong stances, broad shoulders, energy that filled the room. Each movement was meant to dominate, to send a message before contact even happened. They were used to opponents reacting to that presence, stepping back, tightening up, losing rhythm. She did not react. Her stance was smaller, tighter, economical. Nothing wasted. Every inch of movement had a reason behind it. Years of repetition had stripped away everything unnecessary. What remained was efficiency. Discipline shows in how someone waits. She did not rush forward. She did not try to prove anything early. She let them move first, because movement reveals intention. When someone commits to strength, they expose timing. When someone relies on power, they create openings without knowing it. One Marine stepped in aggressively, expecting resistance, expecting to feel weight collide with weight. Instead, he met emptiness. His momentum carried him slightly off balance, just enough. A small shift, almost invisible, turned his forward drive into a mistake. Brute strength depends on control of the moment. Lose that control, and strength becomes a liability. She understood that instinctively. Her response was not explosive. It was precise. A simple adjustment of angle. A measured counter. Nothing dramatic. Nothing excessive. The room started to change, but slowly. At first, it looked like an accident. A misstep. Something that could happen to anyone. The Marines told themselves it was nothing. One of those things that happens during sparring. They reset, still confident, still smiling. Discipline also shows in restraint. She did not follow up when she could have. She did not press the advantage. Karate teaches you not to take more than the moment gives you. Force used unnecessarily creates vulnerability. She stepped back, calm, ready again. That pause confused them. In their world, advantage is something you pile on. You keep pushing until the other person breaks. Her pause did not make sense within their logic. It felt like hesitation, and they mistook it for weakness. The next approach was faster, stronger. Two Marines moved closer, cutting off angles, trying to box her in. Their plan relied on numbers and pressure. Overwhelm the space. Remove options. End it quickly. Discipline thrives under pressure. Her breathing stayed steady. Her eyes stayed soft, unfixed. She tracked movement without chasing it. When one Marine lunged, the other was half a second behind. Just enough separation to matter. Timing does not care how strong you are. She shifted again. Minimal movement. Maximum effect. One attacker stumbled into the path of the other. Strength collided with strength, and suddenly the room heard impact that did not come from her at all. The sound was sharp, unmistakable. This was the moment when brute force began to unravel. Strength requires coordination. Discipline exploits the lack of it. She never matched their power. She never needed to. She simply let their own momentum do the work. Faces tightened. Laughter faded. Muscles tensed differently now. Not lose confidence, but guarded awareness. They were thinking instead of acting, and that hesitation slowed them down. Her movements stayed consistent. Same calm. Same control. No change in expression. Discipline does not rise and fall with emotion. It remains steady regardless of the situation. That steadiness is what makes it dangerous. They started to realize that power alone was not enough. Every heavy strike met air. Every aggressive step found its balance stolen. The harder they tried, the less effective they became. Their strength, once their greatest asset, was now working against them. Karate had taught her that true dominance is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not rely on intimidation. It exists in choices made at the right moment. Discipline turned the fight into something they did not recognize, and brute strength had no answer for it. It did not happen all at once. There was no single strike, no dramatic fall that announced the change. The shift crept in quietly, almost politely, the way reality does when it begins to contradict belief. At first, they told themselves nothing had changed. A stumble, a misstep, a bad angle. Small excuses that kept their confidence intact. Then it happened again. Another advance met with nothing. Another burst of speed turned into imbalance. Movements that once felt automatic now felt rushed, slightly off. The rhythm they were used to controlling no longer belonged to them. Something had slipped, and none of them could quite say when. She was not faster in an obvious way. She was earlier. Her responses arrived before their intentions fully formed. Where they expected resistance, there was space. Where they expected retreat, there was redirection. Every exchange ended with them adjusting and her already reset. The mat no longer felt like home. Familiar distances betrayed them. Strikes that normally landed clean-cut through air. Their feet began to tangle, not from lack of training, but from overcommitment. They were trying to force an outcome that refused to be forced. Voices quieted. The casual commentary stopped. No one was laughing now. Attention narrowed. Shoulders tightened. The room leaned in, not out of excitement, but confusion. The kind that comes when something does not behave the way it should. She remained unchanged. Same posture, same breathing, same measured presence. That consistency made the contrast sharper. The more frantic they became, the calmer she appeared. It was unsettling. Fighters expect resistance to escalate with pressure. Instead, pressure seemed to dissolve around her. One Marine circled wider, trying to find an opening from a different angle. Another stayed back, watching more carefully now. The coordination they relied on began to fray. They were no longer moving as a unit. Each was responding to her individually, reacting instead of planning. That was the moment the fight shifted. Control had quietly changed hands. Not through dominance, but through disruption. She was dictating pace without anyone noticing. Slowing moments here, speeding them up there. Drawing reactions, then slipping out of reach before those reactions could complete. A sharp intake of breath cut through the silence as one Marine lost balance again, catching himself just before falling. That sound carried weight. It was the first sign of effort breaking through composure. Sweat was no longer just from exertion, but from tension. They started second-guessing themselves. A half-step delayed. A strike pulled short. A hesitation before committing. In combat, hesitation is loud. It announces itself in broken rhythm and uneven timing. She heard it immediately. She did not capitalize with aggression. She capitalized with positioning. Always just outside reach. Always at angles that made straight lines useless. The fight became a series of almosts for them. Almost landing. Almost connecting. Almost catching her. Almost as exhausting. Muscles burned faster when movements led nowhere. Breathing grew heavier as effort stopped producing results. Their strength had no place to go. It piled up inside them, turning sharp and clumsy. They tried to reset, backing off slightly, but the reset never fully came. The confidence that allowed them to relax between exchanges was gone. Every second felt active now. Every moment required attention. The mental load grew heavier than the physical one. She saw it in their eyes. The shift from assumption to calculation. From certainty to awareness. Awareness slows people down when they are not used to it. She was used to it. She lived there. The mat echoed differently now. Footfalls were louder. Movements less fluid. The room itself seemed smaller. Space had become something she controlled, not something they occupied. They were no longer testing her. They were trying to solve her. Trying to figure out what they were missing. Trying to understand why nothing worked the way it should. That search pulled them further out of the present moment. She stayed present. Each exchange deepened the imbalance. Each failed attempt chipped away at the story they had brought into the room. The fight had stopped being about winning. It had become about regaining footing, regaining rhythm, regaining something familiar in a situation that no longer felt familiar at all. And with every second that passed, the realization edged closer, heavy and unavoidable, that the ground beneath them had shifted long before they noticed, and that everything they were doing now was happening on terms they did not set. The silence did not arrive suddenly. It settled in piece by piece, filling the spaces where confidence used to live. At first, there were still sounds. Heavy breathing, shoes sliding against the mat, a sharp exhale here and there. But the talking was gone. The casual remarks, the encouragement, the jokes meant to keep things loose had disappeared without anyone noticing the exact moment they stopped. No one wanted to be the next one to speak. The Marines stood differently now. Shoulders no longer rolled with ease. Hands no longer hung loose at their sides. Their bodies were tense in a way that came from uncertainty, not readiness. They were still strong, still trained, but something had been taken from them. The assumption that this would go their way had evaporated, and without it, the room felt unfamiliar. She stood where she had been standing all along. Calm, balanced, still. Her breathing had never changed, and now that contrast was impossible to ignore. While they struggled to regain composure, she looked as though nothing significant had happened at all. Someone shifted their weight, the sound of rubber scraping lightly against the mat louder than it should have been. Another Marine wiped sweat from his forehead, not bothering to hide the frustration in the motion. Eye contact broke and reformed in quick, uncertain glances. No one wanted to meet her gaze for too long. The silence was heavier than any strike. It pressed down on the group, forcing them to confront what had just happened without commentary or distraction. There was no laughter to soften it. No explanation offered out loud. Each Marine replayed the last few minutes in his own head, searching for the mistake, the miscalculation, the point where things had gone wrong. They had no shared story anymore. Moments earlier, they had been united by confidence. Now, each of them stood alone with his thoughts. The silence made those thoughts louder. Too loud to ignore. Too honest to dismiss. She did not fill the quiet. She did not step forward to claim anything. That restraint made the silence stretch further. In their world, dominance often comes with noise. Shouts, commands, declarations of control. Her dominance came without sound, and that made it harder to process. One Marine straightened, as if preparing to say something, then stopped. Whatever words came to mind felt inadequate. Apologies did not fit. Jokes would land wrong. Explanations would sound hollow. The silence rejected all of it. The realization moved through the room without being spoken. This was not luck. This was not a fluke. This was not a single good moment strung together by chance. What they had witnessed came from depth, from training that went beyond physical strength, from experience that did not need to announce itself. Respect does not always arrive with admiration. Sometimes it comes with discomfort, with the sting of being wrong, with the unsettling awareness that your assumptions were not just inaccurate, but limiting. They had assumed she was outmatched. They had assumed they were offering her something by letting her participate. Now they stood in the aftermath of that belief, unsure how to reconcile it with what their bodies had just learned. One Marine finally nodded, small and almost involuntary. Not to anyone in particular, just an acknowledgement of reality settling into place. Another followed, slower, more deliberate. No words passed between them, but the shift was clear. The way they held themselves had changed. The way they looked at her had changed. This was not the loud respect of cheers or praise. It was quieter, heavier, the kind that reshapes how you see someone permanently, the kind that makes you reconsider how you measure skill and how quickly you judge it. She remained where she was, not waiting for recognition, not seeking validation. She had not entered the space to earn their approval. That indifference to outcome was part of what earned it. The silence continued, no longer awkward, but thoughtful. A pause filled with recalibration, with old assumptions breaking down and new ones forming. The Marines were no longer thinking about winning or losing. They were thinking about learning, about gaps in their understanding, about how many times they might have overlooked capability because it did not look the way they expected. The room felt different now, not hostile, not competitive, just honest. The kind of honesty that comes after something undeniable has occurred, and there is no version of events that can undo it. No one asked her who she was or where she had trained. Those questions would come later, when words felt appropriate again. For now, the silence said everything that needed to be said. Respect did not come easily, and it did not come all at once. It arrived reluctantly, dragged in by experience rather than offered freely. These were Marines. Respect, to them, was earned through shared hardship, through visible strength, through proving yourself in ways everyone recognized. What happened on that mat did not fit their usual framework, and that made it harder to accept. At first, respect showed up as caution. Movement slowed. Distance increased. No one rushed in anymore. They watched her differently now, not with curiosity, but with calculation. Every shift of her weight was tracked. Every small adjustment noted. This was the beginning of it, though no one would have called it respect yet. Pride resisted. Pride always does. It whispered that the conditions were wrong, that the situation was unusual, that on another day, under different rules, the outcome might change. Pride searched for a way to keep the old hierarchy intact, to preserve the story they had believed before she stepped into the room. But bodies do not lie. Muscle memory does not lie. Timing does not lie. No matter how the mind tried to reframe it, the physical truth remained. They had been outmaneuvered. Not once. Repeatedly. Cleanly. Without spectacle. That truth settled in deeper than words ever could. One Marine rolled his shoulders again, slower this time, as if feeling them for the first time. Another flexed his hands, replaying the sensation of reaching and finding nothing. Their bodies were processing a lesson their pride had not yet caught up to. Respect began to take shape in the way they stood. Straighter, but not performative. Grounded. Less show, more presence. The casual swagger was gone, replaced by something quieter and more solid. They were adjusting, not just to her, but to a new understanding of what skill could look like. Someone finally spoke, but the tone was different. Short, neutral, stripped of humor. It was not an apology and not a challenge. Just acknowledgement. The kind that says, "I see you now." She responded the same way she had responded to everything else. Calm. Direct. No celebration. No reminder of what had just happened. She did not need to reinforce the lesson. It was already embedded. This was respect earned the hard way. Not through dominance, but through disruption. Not by overpowering them, but by dismantling assumptions they did not know they were carrying. That kind of respect lingers longer because it forces change. They started asking questions, but not out loud yet. Those questions formed internally first. How did she see openings so early? How did she stay balanced under pressure? How did she control space without asserting it? These questions were uncomfortable because they pointed inward. Respect deepened as curiosity replaced defensiveness. Curiosity is a sign that pride has loosened its grip. It means someone is ready to learn again. For Marines, learning never really stops, but it often follows moments like this, moments where certainty breaks and something more accurate takes its place. They no longer saw her as an exception or an anomaly. They saw her as a practitioner of a different discipline, one that complemented their own in ways they had not considered. Strength had not been dismissed. It had been put into context. The room held a new energy now. Not competitive, not confrontational, focused, attentive. The kind of energy that comes after a hard reset, when everyone understands the rules have changed and old shortcuts no longer apply. One Marine nodded again, more deliberately this time, meeting her eyes fully. The nod carried weight. It was an unspoken admission. You earned this. Not because you surprised us, but because you showed us something real. That is the kind of respect that does not fade when the moment ends. It follows people out of the room. It changes how future encounters unfold. It reshapes how challenges are issued and how confidence is measured. She did not stay long after that. There was no need to. The impact had already been made. The lesson had already landed. What remained was theirs to carry forward, to wrestle with, to integrate into how they trained and how they judged others. Respect, when earned this way, does not come with applause. It comes with quiet shifts in behavior, with sharper listening, with fewer assumptions, with the understanding that mastery does not always announce itself, and that the hardest lessons are often delivered without force, without noise, and without asking for recognition at all.